what I'd like to do now is to really, we've been talking about advocacy, global advocacy. I've been talking a lot about working together, and I've been talking about finding out more about the special needs your child has, so you know what to advocate for and what not to waste your time with. I do think it's really important for parents to recognize that when they walk into the early intervention center or into the rec center or into the school, that the professionals there may not know a lot about your child's type of special need, and they certainly don't know a lot about your child. They also tend to be really busy, right? Because there's waiting lists for everything, and they're trying to help as many children as possible. So one of the things that we recommend for families in many different circumstances is developing a profile of their child. A sort of written, kind of 2 pages is good. And why a profile? It's a concise way of sharing information that you think is important with professionals. So instead of giving them a 20-page report that you expect them to read before the next day, I tell you they're not probably going to have time to do that. If you do a short profile for them about key things about your kid that they should know. He's terrified of rabbits. He adores, or dogs, more likely to run. Terrified of dogs, loves trains. Those kinds of things, so that they have something to hang on. And you've written it, right? And it's your thoughts about what's really important. At the back of your handout, and something you'll find online as a Word document, is, so I think it's Appendix A. Yeah. And it's called Appendix A, Student Profile. And I wanted to suggest that in a moment I'm going to ask you to try and work on one of those for your child. This one is set up for a school-age child, but it could also be for a daycare. And the idea is, you spoke a few moments ago, we had a question about what happens if the age changes, and or what happens if someone's going to work with my child and they don't know them. So doing this kind of profile, which can be in the child's file or folder, is really helpful for people to get a quick sense of, they're going to be working with a little boy. They know he loves trains. They've got, there's a lot of pressure on them to sort of make that connection with the child first on. If they know that the best way of making a connection is to go and get some trains, or try and draw some pictures of some trains, or do math with trains, that's going to be very helpful to engage that child. So those are the sorts of things we're talking about. And these can be done for a daycare, for a preschool. It could be done, say, for example, even for a job site. I mean, it would look different, right? But it's a sort of quick way of giving the key things that you'd like that person to know. Because often what families find is that the school district or the school team says, we don't like to look at all the reports on a child. We want to get our own sense of who he is. That can be good. They're not going to read about all those difficult behavior reports that are in that file. On the other hand, they may have developed a whole bunch of new difficult behaviors because they haven't read that file. And so what you're going to try and do in this little 2-pager is how you can help your son or daughter be successful, right? And what you're willing to do. So if you're willing to do that work, and you put a picture, the cutest picture you've got, and you make it upbeat, that really helps. I would suggest that you also talk about where that can be used, like, that can be given to new members of staff. You can write on it. You can decide the level of confidentiality. Some families have found that they ask for it to be posted in the staff room because there's a lot of people who are going to come in contact with your child. So it's great to have, that quick profile of, here's Jimmy. He really loves people's hair. And we're really working on Jimmy not touching other people's hair, right? But he does that. I mean, my son, when he was young, had a particular affinity to ladies' stockings. very embarrassing. And you know, when you're 4 and cute, that is cute. When you're 14 and you still have an affinity to lady stockings, that's called sexual assault, right? So in our world, we're all trying to help our kids make progress. So these little kind of 1-pagers, or 2 pages, which you can keep updated, is, you know, things that we'd like help on. If Jimmy tries to touch your hair, here's how we'd like you to redirect it. You know, that's kind of, I'm giving you an extreme example here, but it's really about communicating in such a way that the entire school community is part of the team, right? And obviously, you're trying to trust people, and maybe you want to put on that this information is confidential to the school environment, because you don't want people talking about your kid outside, right? But you know, again, it's because children with autism live in all environments. You know, autism is happening with them in school, in the dentist's office, at the mall. That we really want to share that information, and increasingly our communities are becoming more accepting. And I think it's because a lot of families have taken a deep breath and thought to themselves, I need to share in order to help my child. You know, and it's part of the role we all have of educating, and it's very exhausting. You know, I talked about it before, about how tiring this is, that you're educating people all the time, but really, the opposite of education is ignorance. So, you know, it really behooves us to try. So have a quick look at the form in the back of your book. And I'm going to give you, say, 3-4 minutes just to write down a few notes about what you'd put in that section. And I want to see those pens moving. Because it's very easy to say, I'll do it later. But it's actually not that hard. So in each of the sections, if you write down, you know, what are their strengths, preferences, is it, you know, great at math? You want the teacher to know he's great at math because she should give him the opportunity to shine in front of the other children, right? Or great drawings, a great artist. And, you know, communications, what does he use for communication? Is it using icons, pictures? Does he have good language? You want them to know what your child's capabilities are so that we don't spend 6 months, they haven't read the report because they're very busy, and they don't realize that the child actually could be doing much better. So it's a way of supporting the team. So take a couple of minutes to fill that in. Okay, everybody. So your special assignment for January 4th is to have a profile done of your child. Very brief. 1 page is great. 2 pages is okay. More than that is too much, right? And to be able to share it with whoever works with them. And you could say, what do you think? You could ask for their feedback. What should I write here? What, you know? And that makes them part of the team. And you can ask for help for the people who work with your child to help to work on this profile. So just to do a little bit of recapping, we've been talking a bit about understanding your child's needs. So understanding whatever their diagnosis is, and it can be several diagnoses, unfortunately. You know, it would be great if we just got one, autism, but it often comes with, you know, ADHD, Tourette's syndrome. Sometimes it can be Fragile X. Sometimes a child can have Down syndrome and autism. We've had situations where families have been told that we didn't want to tell you he has autism as well because, you know, Downs is enough to deal with, as though the family didn't need to have that information, right? You're not, so these, you know, to get back to this whole issue of diagnoses, it's really important to know what you're dealing with. So one family I knew very well, they have a son with both autism and Down syndrome, and she said, you know, I used to go to those parent meetings for the Down syndrome groups, and like, I just, you know, what their concerns were, my son was not there. And when I tell them what my son was doing, they'd just like be horrified. And she said, and then after he had a diagnosis of autism and I started going to that group, she said, I felt so much better because, you know, she didn't quite say, these are my people, but that's basically it. That you know, that the kinds of issues that our families deal with are very peculiar sometimes. And to have families that you can laugh with as opposed to people who think, oh my goodness, You know, that's because you don't want to be judged, right? And I think that that's a part of that piece. So understanding the condition, what you're dealing with, your child's history, the strategies and supports that have worked for him, and communicating that. So you're really, you know, if you know nothing, if you haven't sort of, the message for this morning is that you really are and have to be the expert on your child. No one else is going to do that. And how the conditions that your child's being diagnosed with impacts them is where you become the expert.